Good morning. I have a second section of my sermon which is on chapter 7, so that's why you see number 2 there. I hope you are diligently reading the document, and it's good to see Greg and Ola back. You've come back from being migrants, have you? Well, it's good to see you. I heard Lviv mentioned in a program yesterday, and I said, I know where that is. So they've just come back from Ukraine. And anyone else come back from anywhere, or are you going anywhere? Okay, we won't welcome or do anything like that to anyone. What did we talk about last time I preached? What was the key word? Yes, and Bogdan actually had an experience like that. He asked his guide what to do, and he said, follow me. And so we are going to expand a little bit on this follow me story, because following is always a good thing to do. Now, I wish most sermons were as interesting as that. But today we are going to actually spend a little time expanding the text that we had as our base text last time. And I'd like you to turn in your Bible to Luke chapter 9, verse 23. This one up the front here is the New Living Translation. And I'm going to ask a few people to read from a different translation. So if you find one that's not the New Living, and we'll go somewhere and we'll ask people to read, because this text I want you to get clearly in your mind as we talk through this morning.
It's the message. Then he told them what they could expect for themselves. Anyone who intends to come with me has to let me lead. You're not in the driver's seat. I am. That's it.
Very good.
NIV. Then he said to them, if anyone would come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me.
Thank you. Any other translations?
The original here. And he said to them all, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me.
Thank you. That was the one Paul used. Yeah, the King James one. Yep. Any other translations we've got that will help us clarify? What have you got there, Richard?
New King James 23. Then he said to them all, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me.
Thank you. Any others? No others? I heard a voice in the wilderness.
Common English Bible. Jesus said to everyone, all who want to come after me must say no to themselves, take up their cross daily, and follow me.
Thank you. So we have this text, which is one of the key texts when it comes to being a follower of Jesus. Who did he speak to? Everyone. This is not just the disciples. It's not just a select group of people. It wasn't a a dinner party or anything. He's talking to a crowd. So this refers to everyone. He uses the word if, and the if has to do with conditions. You know, if you kick my tyres, I'll find out they're pumped up. You can't find out unless you do something. If you mix your sugar and your salt and don't put any milk in, will you get a cake? You probably wouldn't anyhow, would you? With salt and flour. But you get the drift. If you pass your exams, you get a gift. A condition always has two sides to it. And he's saying here that there is this condition. You can choose to or you can choose not to. The condition is that if you want to be a follower, there are three things. Now, a follower here in the original language is basically the word disciple. And a disciple was a follower. He was a person, or she was a person. No, she's were. They're always he's who followed a guru. The follower is the apprentice, what we would call a trainee. And this was the perpetual life of a disciple. In fact, in the New Testament, the word Christian is used 3 times. And the word disciple is used 269. 269. I don't want to argue with you, but you can agree with me and be right. Somewhere around there anyhow. So the idea of being a follower of Jesus is all about being a trainee or an apprentice or a follower. And when you follow someone, you are taking their lead. You are giving your life into their hands. If you follow the wrong way, you will end up at the wrong place. I do recall following the instructions when I used to sell newspapers when I was 10 years old. And this is when you had shops up and down the road, you know, these old towns. And it was in the town of Shepparton. And we had I had a lot of customers. I used to regularly go around, and one day a guy says, "Follow me." I says, "Well, how?" He was on a bike, and I says, "How am I going to do that?" "I'll grab that one." So I grabbed that one, not thinking too much about who it belonged to. Followed him out, and guess what happened? I got bitten by a dog. So I came back, left the bike there, and got roused on by the boss of the newspaper shop, and went home, and I had to go get a needle, which was not real nice because needles are always crooked, aren't they? But following the wrong way will lead you to the wrong place. So here are the 3 elements that he says, if you want to be my follower, they're the 3 things. You must deny yourself in the King James, or you must give up your own way. The second one is take up your cross daily and follow me. Now, I'd just like to spend a little bit of time looking at the language. You'll notice this here, these 2 here. We can say to someone, you're in the school, you know, you drop your pen and the teacher says, pick up your pen. Is that a perpetual action or is that just a point action? It's a point, isn't it? Eat your lunch. While you're eating it, perpetual, but you just eat your lunch and it's done. And that's what these 2 here are. Give up your own way and take up your cross. Now, do you think these are things you do perpetually, or is it more that you've done it and you're now on the way with Jesus? You've done it. That's the answer, anyhow. This here, however, is slightly different. This is perpetual. This is a perpetual action. The following is a thing that is the perpetual thing that you need to do, because it's easy to give up your own way. It's easy to say no to yourself, but unless you follow the right direction, you're up the creek. This one here, take up your cross. Some people say, well, this is a bit rough. But if people were against Jesus when he was around, why ought not they to be against you if you are a follower of his? Because that's what Paul says. You know, if they didn't agree with him, they won't agree with you. So sometimes we can spiritualise this away and say, oh, all the burdens that you carry. But sometimes there is persecution, and if you go to India or go to some of these places where people who are Christians are being persecuted and even killed, you then have a sharp focus that this text actually means what it says. So this is the shape of that text, and this is the shape of where we're going. Now, if you don't give up your own way, what's going to happen? That is the question for today. You will end up being an atheist, a functional atheist. You'd be in church, but you probably function like an atheist. The guy who created this term functional atheist was Parker Palmer. And he's a pastor, a teacher, a lecturer, whatever. And he reckons that this is what a functional atheist is, that everything depends on you. Ultimately, everything depends on you. Now, is that right or wrong? It's wrong. Well, how does an atheist operate? They usually violently opposed to God, assuming that they have the view that there is a God because they're opposed to him. So even though they're atheists, they're agreeing that God exists. You can be an agnostic, say, well, I have no idea, irreligious, give it all away. Basically saying that God doesn't matter. If you have a God, well, that's good for you, but for me, no, it's no good. Three things I'd like you to concentrate on. And the functional atheist operates like this. We live as if God doesn't matter. The second thing, we treat grace as a license for mediocre living. And the third thing, we refuse to let Christ rule all the areas of my life. Now, I want to ask you the question. Are you a functional atheist or are you not? I don't want a show of hands because I don't want to have to go and visit you all. But what I would like you to do is to internally ask yourself the question, is there somewhere, some place that I need to revisit in order to be a follower of Jesus? Because the assumption is that we are all followers of Jesus here, okay? So the assumption is that we want to do these three things. Now, what are these three things? Deny yourself, take up your cross daily, and follow me. And it is all in the following, the present continuous action that the gospel talks of. So I have a quiz. There's 5 questions in the quiz, and you need to follow this quiz very carefully. You won't need to give offerings if you get it all right next week. So, the first question is, when a problem arises, what do you do first? Try to fix it? Doubt God's intention for you? Or seek God's guidance and listen for his voice? Now, you know what the answer should be, don't you? I'm not asking you the question what the answer should be. I'm asking, what is your response to that question? In our rational, in our postmodern world, give God away, I'll fix it. The humanist says, We don't need God because we're always getting better. But what does a believer say? Consider Abraham. Where does Abraham fit into these three options? He could be A or B, couldn't he? You know, he was a guy who left his home, Ur of the Chaldees, travelled all across Mesopotamia and down into Canaan, into the Promised Land, that area in Palestine, and he was told his descendants will be like the sand of the sea, and all people will come from you who are believers in me. Now he's 90 odd. Any odd 90s here? 90, any people 90 here? My mum just turned 91, June 29. And her nephew, her grandson, turned 19 on the 30th. She thought that was sort of good. So I tell you these things because she told me. So here Abraham, your descendants will be like the sand of the sea. And he's 90 odd and she is probably much the same. How many people at 90 and 80 around that have children? None. Well, very few, very few. All of the gadgets you need to make it happen are all probably heading south. And so here Abraham says, it's not going to happen. And Sarah said to him, we need to get this done. We need to make it happen. And so, what does she suggest to him? Adam was seduced by Eve, and Sarah seduced Abraham with her handmaiden. In other words, the servant. So you take the servant, do what you need to do, and a son was born. Ishmael is his name. Now, from that day to this, has there been friction between the two sons? We still bear the consequences of that one fateful night in a Bedouin tent where the wrong woman slept with Abraham. I would suggest that in the scope of what we're doing here, talking about deny yourself, take up your cross and follow, that the following would happen sometimes in hard times and sometimes in good times. However, it's the following that text wants us to look at. Question number 2. When you make a to-do list, what do you do first? Now, any of you people list makers? Yeah, we've got a couple. Yeah, I in fact know a person who does a whole lot of stuff, then creates the list and then crosses them off. Now that is really, I was going to say anal retentive, but can't use that word in church, can we? But that is, yeah, it's chronic. That's a better word. So when you make a to-do list, all you people who make lists, and those of you who just keep them in your head, what do you do first? Write up a list and get stuck into it? Do you prioritise? Or what is on the top happens? Or the easy thing, do you do the easy things? Do you prioritise, fix the important things first? Or do you seek God's guidance and His priority for your life this day? My mother does that quite well. She says, I was going to tell you something. And I say, well, you haven't done it so far, you better start. She says, I can't remember what it was. But you know what the answer should be, don't you? But what do you do? where do you think Jonah fits into this story here? Now, before the fish incident, where does he fit into this story? A or B? Now, he was told to go to Nineveh. Where did he go? I can help you out, God, because I think I've got a better option. I will create an option for you to send me to Tarshish, which was basically the Sydney of the then known world. The biggest city in Palestine. It was very wealthy. It was pretty godless. He says, I should go to Tarshish. That's the place I was born. I'll go home and tell them all about it. But what happened? Got on the boat to travel. Big storm came up, and they cast lots. And, I sometimes wonder in the Bible, there's a lot of gambling going on in the Bible. They cast lots. That's basically throwing dice and seeing if it comes out a double six. And a double six, you win. And so they used to often they'd get straws or sticks, and someone would hold them, and they'd all be different sizes, and the shortest one, that was the bad end of it. And the shortest one here, who got it? Jonah. So he was thrown overboard. Big fish swallowed him up. He was spewed out after 3 days with algae and gangrene all over him. And he then decides maybe it's a good idea to go to Nineveh. In Nineveh, he was a worse believer than he was in the belly of the fish. In the belly of the fish, if you read the story, he confesses, I'm a bad man and I need to follow you, and you are the God of... When he's under the tree that withers, what's he doing? Complaining like mad. So where do you reckon Jonah fits into the sea at this point? When he's in the belly of the fish, when he's doing it tough. Is that a learning experience for us that we can take hold of? Question 3. In your work life, how do you let God in? In your work life. That is, most of us spend quite a bit of time at our work, don't we? If you're like me, you spend a bit too much time. If you're like Paul, you don't spend much time at all. If you're like... I was going to rattle off a few more names, but that's dangerous. So here in the work life experience, how do you let God in? Or how do you do it? Say, well, my devotions have worship in the morning, that'll carry me through. I don't have time to let God in. Or set my watch and remind me hourly. Now that you're getting the drift that number C is the one that we should have as the answer. But in your life, do you have time to let God in? Or doesn't he really feature? I have a few stories here which I got off the internet, so therefore they are true. Now, even if they're not true, reflect and see how we would go. This one is San Francisco Catholics petition God to remove Jesus from the Trinity. In an unprecedented move, more than 100 prominent San Francisco-based Catholics, Roman Catholics, signed a petition and ran a full-page ad on Friday calling on God to remove Jesus from the Trinity for fostering an atmosphere of division and intolerance. The plea follows months of dissent within the Archdiocese over Jesus' emphasis on traditional conservative doctrine, including asking all Catholics to accept that both sex outside of marriage as well as homosexual relations are gravely evil. In their open letter to God, Jesus' critics say his morality clause push is not only mean-spirited, but sets a pastoral tone that is closer to persecution than evangelisation. What do you think of that? Could be true. What about this one? The headline is "Church to Cease All References to God in Effort to Boost Attendance." Fayetteville, North Carolina. Explaining that their dwindling attendance had to be dealt with by any means necessary, the leader of the Lifesong Church announced Monday that they're ceasing all references to God in their Sunday services, small groups, outreach efforts, printed materials, effective immediately. Talking about God has been important as part of our church's 15-year history, but look, we have to stay true to our mission statement. Get butts on seats and keep them there. Teaching pastor Mark Davidson told reporters, noting that the debt acquired 5 years ago after building and property beautification isn't going to pay itself off. We are a church like any other business. We have a bottom line. We've got to get more giving units here, and to do that, we have to give customers what they want. Instead of God talk, the church will offer messages focused on relevant issues like self-improvement, sports, movies, health, and positive thinking. Asking if he expects a pushback from the new policy, Davidson says yes, but we have to do what we have to do. I, for one, am not going to take a pay cut. Now, do you think somewhere there they fit into this question here? It's quite possible for churches to lose sight of what's going on. And we here also are in this questionable time when we ask ourselves, what are we going to do for the local community? Now, I know many of you have activities which you do privately without organisation. But the question I have for myself, how often do I not have time to let God in? Even though I'm talking about him, visiting the saints, teaching at school, which is my cross at the moment. How often do I not do it? And I would say too often. And I would like to suggest that you minister to me when I'm ministering to you. Because this is something we all need to do together to encourage and cajole and enforce the idea that if you are a follower, you've got to be following intently. So the next question I have for you, how many times a day do you think about God or talk to him? And this is your answer, not mine. You work on this one. Where do you reckon Daniel fits into this story here? You know, Daniel was a young fella in a foreign land, given a different name, and last Sabbath you heard all about this. And Darius in Daniel chapter 6 is encouraged by all of his governors and leaders. Why don't you make a law and set it up for a month so that anyone who worships to any other god except you, O great one, will be put to death. You know, in the Middle East, there is no yes or no. I mean, there's no shades of grey. It's all either you live or you die. And today we see the same example, that you don't agree with someone, they'll kill you and then ask questions. Bit late. But Daniel here was given that option. So he's put into the lion's den. No. He then goes home after hearing this, and he then, what does he do? Opens his windows, faces Jerusalem, and prays, as he has always done. So obviously, what's going to happen to him? They're going to do away with him because Daniel had too much influence as a non-Persian person. He was number 2 in the government. And so what happens? He's thrown into the lion's den. Now, YouTube and me and lions are great mates. I love watching lions and tigers and leopards. I have a housemate who does not like them. So when I'm by myself, guess what I watch? And I'm looking for illustrations, sermon illustrations, when I'm doing this. You know, lions, they're vicious creatures. They can spring from a 10-foot jump, 10-foot jump. What's that, 3 metres? They can jump 3 metres without trouble. Especially the male lion, the amount of force in his jaw will just crush whatever is in it. So he's hairy and mangy, and in a lion's den, like a third world zoo, mangy, hungry. And here, God's prophet is thrown into this mangy, miserable place, expecting that he'll be gobbled up as an appetizer. Darius comes over days later and says, "Daniel, are you alive in there?" Good question or silly question? It's a good question because somehow Darius must have known there was something different about the God he served than himself, because he was classified as a god. Daniel says, "Yeah, I'm still down here. Bit hungry, but any chance of getting me out?" And so he took him out. Now, how often do you think he was thinking about God in the den? I think a lot. I don't know if I was down there, I'd be complaining to God like crazy. Where's my electric blanket? Where's my food? Where's the housekeeper? This place needs a spring clean, you know. There's any amount of things you can complain about. But ultimately, the following reaps the reward. Last question I've got for you. Regarding spiritual things, I'm not interested, confused by all the information, quite interested but don't have the tools to study with. I'm into it in a big way. Where do you fit into this? It's possible you're not interested. You're here for other reasons. But I would say probably not. You're confused by all the information. There is a lot of information given, isn't it? Next week you won't remember what I'm saying, will you? You won't remember. Point C. Quite interested, but don't have the tools. Now, the person I'd like you to reflect on is the Ethiopian. Now, Philip is some way away, and an angel comes to him and says, "Philip, go down to this place, and you'll find an Ethiopian. Stay close to his chariot." Now, my thinking of a chariot is that they race, they run. So I don't know how fast he was running, but he got close to him, and he heard the Ethiopian reading from Isaiah 53. And he says, "Ethiopian, my friend, understanding what you're reading?" He says, I have no idea what I'm reading. Now, where was he in this? Probably C or B. He says, tell me all about it. So what does Philip do? He tells him the story of the gospel. And he says, there's water here, why don't you get baptized? So what does he do? Gets baptized. Now, I wish it was that easy. We went to Russia some years ago with the North New Zealand Conference, went to a city of Kazan, and there were 4 groups that went, and we had a couple of weeks each. We were the last group, and all that we'd prepared was rubbish. The translator didn't know Russian very well. And so the leaders over there said, well, why don't you run a public meeting? Well, we didn't bring anything. He said, no, just talk. They'll come. And after 4 weeks, we baptized 55 people. And on reflection, I thought, that was easy work. But in a godless country like Australia, it's not as easy as that. So here we have the Ethiopian. He was quite interested but didn't have the tools to understand what he was reading about. And if you're in that category, come and see me, because I've got all sorts of things I can show you. I'm reading a book at the moment called Mission Drift. And you probably sort of get the feeling that this is quite relevant to... The writer says, fools say in their heart there is no God. I dread to know what the psalmist would say then of me. Someone who knows in my heart and in my mind and in my soul that God exists, yet too often I live as though he is absent. Relax, ladies, it's just a picture. Now, this guy, what's his name? Brad Pitt. He says, I've got everything. But we are living in a spiritual atrophy in our society. And to that, the questioner says, well, so what do you think should happen? And he says, the emphasis is now on success and personal gain. Now, this guy, if he's talking about personal, he's got it. He's got it all. He says, I'm a guy who's got everything, I know. But I'm telling you, once you have everything, then you're just left with yourself. Yeah, reflect on this a little. You know, we pursue work in order to provide and have, don't we? Whether that's good, bad, or indifferent is not the point. Here, this guy has got everything. He has so much wealth, he doesn't know how to spend it. But he says, once you've got everything, all you are left with is yourself. It doesn't help you to sleep better. It doesn't get you better wives. No, it's not there, is it? You wake up and you're still with yourself. Personal gain and spiritual atrophy. Jonathan Sacks, he's head of the Jewish community in England. Much can be made of governments, but his point is that after the London riots of 2011, is it? Yeah, he made the point in a public statement. He said what the world needs is religion, not as doctrine, but as something that will guard and shape behaviour. And this guy says the same thing. Now a confirmed atheist, I have become convinced of the enormous benefit contribution of Christian evangelisation makes in government projects and international efforts. These alone cannot do. Education and training will not do. In Africa, Christianity changes people's hearts. It brings spiritual transformation. The rebirth is real, and this change is good. Now, he's an atheist making the statement that what Christians do is good. It makes a change. So today, what I would like to ask you, when you do some cooking, any of you watch MasterChef? One person. Well, let me talk to you. Well, just in case you feel it's a little below you or you're a little more righteous than us people who watch TV, MasterChef is a program of competition. And I know you don't believe in competition, but that's your problem. And in this competition, each person is asked to cook, sometimes in groups, sometimes without, but some get voted off every week. And they're down to number 9 now, and they're going to Japan next week, so if you like Japan, watch MasterChef. Channel 10 needs supporters. And so here we are, and regularly they marinate stuff. Now, what does marinating do? Flavours the outside, doesn't it? So it's supposed to do something other than the outside. So where's it supposed to go to? I suppose that's the obvious answer, isn't it, if it's on the... You get my point? If anyone wants to be my follower, he must deny his own way, take up his cross daily, and follow me. This following is not just an add-on. It's not just a commodity which you'll add to your world because you've got other commodities like windsurfing and water surfing and paragliding and motor racing and football, and you know, we've got all these different categories of our life. Is your faith just another one of those add-on things? Or does it permeate the entire being who you are? I ask myself the same question, so I'm not pointing the finger. This is doing church together. In order for us to be and have the life that Christ wishes to offer, our whole being needs to be looked at. Now, I have a book here which is quite distinguished. And I'd like to read a paragraph, and it's not a good idea to read because people go to sleep when you read, but I'm going to do it anyhow. It's on page 78. However, God doesn't leave us there. He inhabits our being and changes our attitudes and values. As we trust him, his ways slowly become our ways. We must maintain a trusting and dynamic relationship with Jesus and continually adhere to his ways. As long as we have this type of connection with him, he will work supernatural change within us just as he promised. That is what Paul means when he says, my present life is physical, but I depend on Jesus knowing that he loves me and given his life for me. Jesus says to his apprentices, the new words and actions are made possible because God directs your thinking.